I'm student Y, and I'm going to be talking about supplementary I took for school. So for the last week of April, I went to a one-week program at the University of Winnipeg where high school students essentially get a feel for what it's like to be on a university campus and do some course-related work. And for the course I chose, I took up chemistry in the marketplace because out of all the courses, it's the topic I'm most interested in. But I did take a second look at the courses. Luckily, in fashion marketing because for the last 2 years I had a project where I was doing sustainable clothing, how to become an Olympian, and 009, which is a very long name. They would have been also interesting topics, but chemistry in the marketplace was the choice to go with because I had tons of experience in chemistry and I like chemistry. So yeah, Monday, first day, and I didn't really have any expectations going in except for like I'm gonna have fun, that I was gonna like it, and that I'm gonna learn a lot. So a couple minutes later, after coming into class started, and the professor, Dr. Wood, introduced herself and her story into chemistry and the work we'll be doing for the week. We also had a class activity where everyone had to introduce themselves and why we were here, and did some lab safety training. And then, so moving on to Tuesday, that's when we actually did our first experiment, which was a gelatin hydrolysis experiment. Dr. Wood first talked about denaturation, which is a process that makes proteins lose their original structure due to factors like heat or chemical action. And we also talked about enzymes, specifically proteases, which started breaking down the peptide bonds in proteins, and a little bit about how RNA might have existed before DNA. We also then also start talked about collagen and gelatin's history, specifically around Jello's introductions, and also on how families made a dessert called Jello salad. And the concept is quite nice as it adds fruit to the Jello, but I don't think I would want to try some people's because some people put cheese, cream cheese, and even meat into it. And I wouldn't want to take a bite of vanilla flavored Jello and taste a big old piece of salami in it. And now you may have heard that there's some cautionary tales about putting stuff like fresh pineapples and fresh kiwi fruit in Jello. So that's our experiment. We tested out some samples of fresh pineapple, fresh kiwi fruit, candied pineapples, canned pineapples, lemons, and bananas to see what happens. After we made the jellos, we had lunch break, and let me tell you, just don't let me have the ball in a basketball game. If we're down and you're looking for a 5 second buzzer beater, I'm gonna break it. But anyways, after that lunch break, we went back then to the lab to check on the results. And as expected, the fresh pineapple and kiwi fruit jello samples did not set, but the candied and canned pineapple set alongside everything else. We thought the lemon sample wouldn't set because it was more acidic than the fresh pineapple, but it didn't have the proteins capable of breaking down the peptide bonds in the jello. The candied pineapple with canned pineapples set did the proteases deactivating in the process of canning and drying respectively. And then so on Wednesday morning, we moved on to our next experiment, which is all about chromatography. And the first experiment was thin layer chromatography, where we had some cheap set of markers from like Dollarama, and to see if they were using pure dyes for a marker's color, or if they mix it with other dyes to make the marker's color. Higher priced products from companies, they're more likely to not use mixed dyes to make a color, and they'll more so just be the pure color itself. I mean, pure dye itself. And we had to pick two color markers, two different color markers to use for their experiment. And then I used purple and blue, which now that I think about it, is a very common combination to use. But anyways, that's my two samples. And now we needed to use a mobile phase and a stationary phase. And we used filter paper, like the paper we use for filtering coffee for the stationary phase. And then we just used some distilled water as our mobile phase. So when we did the experiment, we used two long pieces of filter paper. So you're gonna want it to be just long and thin, and we're drawing the colored dot of each of the markers. One dot on one filter paper, and the other has the other color in it. And then we'll hang them into a beaker with a little bit of water touching the end of the paper. And if you're following this experiment, you're probably going to want to have the dot a little bit higher than the water itself, but like have a space between them because you don't want it to be fully submerged. Because through capillary action, the water moves up the pieces of filter paper and it wants to eventually touch the colored dot, not like instantly. And then we should see the dye molecules start to separate with the water through the filter paper. And both the markers I chose, purple and blue, were made of a mix of dye molecules, instead of being a pure dye. And then since each molecule has unique chemical characteristics such as the polarity and size, they might spend more time in the stationary phase or mobile phase, making it so that everyone's sample had varying speeds. So we compared everyone's samples to each other to see if everyone had around the same results. For the afternoon, we had more of a fun type of chromatography experiment, which is just thin layer chromatography, but we used circular filter paper for this one. So we used two pieces of circular filter paper, and we kind of had a fun mini origami activity where we had to fold one of the circular paper into a cone, and I have a very hard time folding origami instructions, so I just kind of skipped that whole origami activity and just quickly made it into a cone and shoved it in quickly to the mini beaker so that it wouldn't mess up and not be a cone anymore. And then with our other piece of paper, we kind of just decided we were supposed to put different colored dots in a pattern. I kind of just skipped those as well. I just kind of did my random dots and just did kind of experiments with it to see what patterns I could make, and it kind of looked like a tie-dye pattern at the end, which is pretty awesome. And then on Thursday, I really liked this experiment actually. It was an experiment on spectroscopy. This allows us to detect chemicals in our samples and to measure how much the chemical is in sample. Chemicals absorb energy with different intensities at different wavelengths, producing a characteristic absorbance spectra. Think of it like a fingerprint, like how they have this kind of fingerprints, and we have like unique, I guess, like etches in our fingerprint that makes it unique. And now, as you may like recall, on Monday we did some lab safety training. One of the things we were trained in is how to read, understand the information in a safe the data sheet, or as we'll call them, SDS for short. Chemical compound we were using at the spectroscopy experiment was copper sulfate, and looking at the WMIS pictograms, we can see that copper sulfate is harmful to the environment and it can cause irritation on our skin, and if swallowed, will be harmful to our system. After making the compound, we needed to have different concentrations of the copper sulfate solution with water in cuvettes within the range of 2.5 milliliters of water and 0.5 milliliters of copper sulfate solution to 3 milliliters of just copper sulfate solution. And we also just used some micropipettes, and they were really fun to use and figure out how they work and how you kind of match it up to how much liquid it absorbs and stuff. So how do we actually see the absorbance of this solution, I guess? Well, we use a machine called a spectrophotometer to measure up the absorbance, and we tested a range of wavelengths from 400 nanometers to 800 nanometers and recorded how much chemical absorbed that light. The spectrophotometer does this by having a light source that goes through a monochromator that makes that line shine through a thin gap into our solution, and then a sensor would see how much light it absorbed and display the results. Everyone took course, compiled the results, and we all decided that 700 nanometers is the base wavelength to record on. And the first sample got 0.458 ABS. Second sample got 6.4 nope. It got 0.643 ABS. Third sample got 8.822 ABS. Fourth sample got 1.174 ABS. Fifth sample got 1.05 ABS, and the sixth and final sample got 1.682 ABS. Moving on to Friday, we were on our last experiment here. We did an experiment on polymers, and Dr. Wood started off by naming some synthetic polymers and natural polymers. Some of the synthetic polymers were named were polystyrene, which is known as under the brand name Styrofoam, PVC, and polytetrafluoroethylene, which is also known under Teflon. Natural polymers we named were protein, And we worked with two polymers, sodium polyacrylate, which will be shorted to SPA, and polyvinyl alcohol, which will be shorted to PVA. The first experiment, which was with SPA, we looked at its property of being able to absorb many times its weight in water, which is kind of like this thing called Orbeez. But we didn't have Orbeez there, so where were we gonna get this material, polymer? Well, as the course name suggests, chemistry in marketplace, it's something that the general public can buy. We got our SPA from diapers because it's the main absorbent in diapers, and alongside the wood pulp inside of the diapers, but it's the main absorbent. Dr. Wood actually had a story where a kid wore diapers while swimming, and it's not the swimming diapers, so it kind of just puffed off into a very like very cool not very cool, probably like very big diaper, and kind of just yeah, it was pretty awesome story, kind of awesome, which is kind of funny actually, not awesome, and yeah, we had a diaper in a bag, and we kind of just had to keep on shaking it, and it kind of weirdly reminded me of that time when I had some of these shake shake fries from McDonald's in the Philippines. If you know, you know. After my team and I finished taking diaper bag, we had to get a specific amount of SPA as a sample, but it didn't have to be too precise. So we were a bit over to specify the amount of SPA. We took water to it and we started marking how much milliliters of water we added. Since we were a bit over, we had the most water absorbed. But a sample, everyone, if they were even if they were right on the mark, some people had less water absorbed and more water absorbed than each other. And this experiment turned out to be an ambiguous experiment. So a second polymer, PVA. It's a water-soluble synthetic polymer. The dishwasher pods use this as the material for the pod because it melts away. Though it can leave microplastics, and for it to be biodegradable, there needs to be specific conditions that not a lot of water treatment plants have. Onward, we also got some borax to use in the experiment. Now, when we apply a solution of borax to a solution of PVA, the boron atom and the borax will form new bonds that link two PVA chains together, which change the properties of the polymer. This process is known as cross-linking. So we mixed up some PVA with water and transferred the solution to a beaker. Then we put some borax and mixed it in. Through this process, the properties of the solution turned into a slime, but very much lost this property throughout the weekend. Next week was so jam-packed with experiments that we actually didn't get a ton of coursework done aside from the experiments, so we kind of just spent the afternoon looking through the course. But as a celebration for the course finishing up, Dr. Wood made some ice cream from flash freezing it with liquid nitrogen. Just pretty awesome. It tasted pretty nice as well. It's cool as well with the liquid nitrogen and stuff. And I forgot which day it was as well, so don't remember this happening on the schedule because it wasn't on the schedule. Dr. Wood also showed us some science magic that she practices for these like outreach days for younger schools, like I guess like middle school, like elementary school, called STEM days, where they just get to do a bunch of science presentations, which I wish I could join, like and volunteer at, because it sounds pretty awesome. And I actually got access to the presentation, and I was able to use this for some videos, like the ones you've seen already on this channel, like the hemophobia video and the MSG video. Those are two videos from the presentation, and some future ones that are planned to release in the future. So if you ever have the chance to take up supplementaries like this for your education, you gotta pick up the opportunity to do it, as you'll get to learn a ton and you'll definitely benefit from it. Thanks for watching.